How is AI revolutionizing project procurement and bidding in the AEC industry? What advantages does it bring to firms looking to improve efficiency and competitiveness?
Yeah, think about a public works director. We'll start there, like you said, is like they got to listen to the council. There's a lot of bureaucracy there. There's a lot of operations in the water space. So how do you manage people manually now? You're putting out fires every day. You come to work, you're literally putting out fire. What AI can do for a public works director is when you sit down in your office in the morning, the AI is going to automate a lot of your processes that are already.
Welcome to this episode of the AEC Engineering and Technology Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping engineering professionals find technology that fits their needs. Did you know AI can reduce project procurement time by up to 50% in the AEC industry? As artificial intelligence continues to reshape how projects are planned, bid, and delivered, AEC firms have the opportunity to streamline workflows, improve efficiency, and stay competitive in an evolving industry. Join me in today's episode as I speak with Chad Smeltzer, President and CEO of Bidcurement, about how AI is revolutionizing project procurement and bidding, the challenges of AI adoption, the growing influence of data centers on infrastructure, and the impact of AI-driven systems on water and electricity use in our communities. If you're curious about the future of AI and AEC and how firms can effectively integrate it into their workflows, this conversation is for you. I'm your host, Nick Heim, and this is the AEC Engineering and Technology Podcast. With that, let's jump into today's episode. Okay, it's now time for our conversation of the week with Chad Smeltzer. Chad, thank you so much for taking the time to join the show, and welcome.
Nick, thank you, man, for inviting me. This is awesome. I love what you guys are doing at the Engineering Management Institute. You and Anthony are putting together these podcasts for educational purposes and bringing value to the industry, man. It's been great. But yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, and that's what we aim to do here at the AEC Engineering and Technology Podcast. Through all of EMI's content, right? It's all about education, and so yeah, we're gonna do some education today, Chad, on what you've got going on with your company and platform. So I'll just jump right into it. Chad, can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself? What inspired you to launch Bidcurement and focus on AI-powered procurement and infrastructure tech?
Yeah, loaded question. Okay, a little bit about myself. I'm an entrepreneur. I've realized that as I've gotten older. I don't like to, sit and, frustrate myself with problems. So I always like to innovate and figure out ways to solve problems. So that's been one of my skill sets and gifts I've noticed. So I've been in the, let's say the public workspace since I was 15. I started building startups when I was 26. I built a company for bioremediation using grease, bacteria to eat fat cells and grease out of sewers in a quick nutshell for a couple of years. And it got acquired by a company that shipped me out to Chicago. Long story short, worked for them for about 6 years and then developed another solution to a problem for sewer systems, which was identifying critical infrastructure assets that are in need of repair. We were using paper-based processes, 3-ring binders. I mean, I'd walk into a public works director's office and I'd be like, Joe, what's on your, like, why do you have so many 3-ring binders? He's like, that's all my inspection data that all the engineering firms give me. And I'm like, holy crap, that's a lot of information just sitting there and it wasn't just a couple, it was like stacks and stacks of data. That's how I looked at it. That's information, right? We should be making better decisions. So I started a company with a founder, Michelle Herod, and we kind of worked together building this technology called Dashboard Dynamics for taking sewer asset data and just compiling it on pivot tables to prioritize which pipes need repaired or which manholes need repaired, because we had all the camera inspection tools and stuff like that. So we built that company. That's basically like a proof of concept. We scaled it. We had 25 employees in 3 years. We scaled it over 6 million in revenue in 3 years. We just kind of blew it up because people are looking for solutions to solve their problems, especially public works directors. Like, how fast can I find my problems and how can I fix my problems? And I need someone to provide value there. So that's how my second startup kind of evolved. And then I realized how bad procurement was, the bidding process. I was like reading construction documents and I'm like, what is going on with some of these construction documents? They were so poorly either written or they're redundant or you could tell they were just copied and pasted. And as I was talking to more contractors and realizing, I was like, man, there's a big issue with, just the clarity and of these projects through documents, and why we're using documents to bid projects is kind of baffling to me. So I started this journey. I said, I'm just going to build a digital platform to streamline the procurement process. So that's my third startup. That's where I'm at now.
If it sounds, Chad, so you're really like, man, you're building something that was kind of informed on like the pain points that you personally experienced, right? That's like every great entrepreneur story.
Yeah, exactly. The pain of one thing is, networking and getting to the decision maker to obviously build a relationship, so you can obviously, if you have a solution, a product or service that you want to get into the municipal infrastructure world, you have to build relationships, because there's a lot of, let's say, lack of trust. The industry's been known as snake oil sales. I used to get hit with that when I started my career a long time ago. Like, they don't believe you until they see it. So everybody's like, oh, my sewer is different than this sewer, for example. And you got to bring your product over here and try it first and do a pilot project. And think about the time. That's another, part of the procurement process, the time, right? So even if you did have a great tool or solution to bring to the industry, it would take you 2 to 3 years before you would probably build enough trust and credibility to get it in to the hands of the decision makers and have them using it. I mean, really, it's a long sales cycle.
And that's a big difference, I'd say, like in the civil infrastructure world when you compare it to just like technology in general, right? Because like you get startups that come into this space and they're used to the tech timelines, like same day, next day responses, right? People are constantly at their desk checking emails, but then you come to our industry, it's like, look, everybody's not at their desk all the time. People are in the field. There's tons of fires, right? Like, it's just not the same thing, which if you think about your comment, that 2 to 3 year cycle, right? That could be 6 months in like the tech space, but here it just takes time.
Yeah. And that's the big problem you just mentioned. Communication was a huge issue. You figured it was me talking to the engineer, talking to the decision maker, the owner, this public works director, and then his civil engineers. And it was all of us trying to work on a project together to get it accomplished, which was, fix the asset, whatever it was. Right. So it's just so many different components and complexities to our procurement process and that's why I built the platform I did originally. Was the digital procurement platform, was streamline communication, execute bidding, award bidding on one place, and then the communication features, and then just having your projects managed in one space. I mean, that's what you want. You don't want to have scattered projects. It's here. People are using, think about this. They're using Monday.com. They're using Microsoft Teams now. They're using all these different SaaS platforms to try and execute project management. And it's pretty wild what's going on with that.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I spoke with a gentleman yesterday whose whole role, like throughout it's a very large general contractor in the U.S. and worldwide. His whole role is basically condensing the tech stack to make things more efficient, because even as good as technology is, just like anything, right? If unchecked, there can be bloat and lots of it.
And there's tons of that. You think about it, like all the processes that an engineer has to go through, the standards they have to look at, the requirements that they have to go through, the compliance. There's so much pressure on an engineer, a civil engineer, particularly for an infrastructure project, that a lot of them are new to the industry too. So you throw somebody that has less experience and limited field experience into a project, and they're just getting bombarded with contractors that are like, hey, man, you should do this, you should do that. Or the other engineers are like, no, this is how you're supposed to do it, right? It's like this back and forth for this poor engineer. I could only imagine. I didn't live that life, but I can imagine.
Well, and speaking from the engineer side, and given, I personally have not worked in the public infrastructure side, but we're not known as a profession that exactly adopts change very quickly, which is like, it's for good reason. It's just the reality of the situation. So Chad, we've talked about a couple challenges. To expand on that, what are some of the biggest challenges in adopting AI for infrastructure projects, and how can firms overcome them while also addressing common misconceptions to better understand real-world applications of the AEC industry? So you talked about snake oil like early in your career. I mean, if you asked, I think, lay people who aren't really into AI in the whole industry, right? Like, there's fatigue, and I think of that almost like a sense of that snake oil salesman going on, because there's a lot of hype around it, but I don't know that people are convinced if they're not kind of in the thick of it.
Yeah, I love this conversation. Think about where we're at right now in and just in civil infrastructure in general, right? We're still paper based, and we're going to move into potentially this. And that's kind of why I pivoted my platform from digital to an AI driven system, because that's where we're going. So we're going to take an industry that's focused on outdated paper processes, the way I kind of explain it to people, and move them into an AI system now in the next 2 to 3 years. Easily, it's going to happen, and it has to happen because AI is driven into the American economy now. So you're looking at data centers that are going to be built. It's going to push for creativity. It's going to push for smarter, faster systems to go through these industries. And civil infrastructure is going to be one of them. So you have to really look at it. So yeah, is AI great right now? No. Is it sometimes, disturbing what it puts out? It's like that mathematical equation didn't make sense. But that's the thing. You have to train it. You have to teach it. It's not like built to learn everybody's problems and fix them. It's actually used to niche down a problem and make it smarter. And you train it and you test it. And that's what we have to understand in civil infrastructure is, yes, is it going to streamline our industry, and it's scary and it makes everybody nervous? For sure. But we have to. We're putting projects out that are over budget. You got all this, bid manipulation potentially going on. You have this lack of education of resources. So think about that. Like, you have contractors that are promoting all this great materials or technologies and products, but how do we know, right? And that's the thing what the snake oil says. Like, if I'm a director, I'm not going to buy something that's a high risk for me to buy something right away that's brand new. So AI is going to help us streamline those processes.
So, and Chad, I'd like to just dig into that further, like with specific examples. So how is AI revolutionizing project procurement and bidding in the AEC industry? What advantages does it bring to firms looking to improve efficiency and competitive? So you talked about like that public works project director. I think that's a great example if you want to start there, or we could talk about consultants or really anybody else along the value chain.
Yeah, think about a public works director. We'll start there, like you said, is like they got to listen to the council. There's a lot of bureaucracy there. There's a lot of operations in the water space. So they're managing people. So how do you manage people manually now? You're putting out fires every day. You come to work, you're literally putting out fires. You kind of mentioned that earlier in our conversation. So what AI can do for a public works director is when you sit down in your office in the morning, the AI is going to automate a lot of your processes that are already occurring out in the field, whether it's in council because there was a meeting and something happened in council where you have to be notified, or if it's in the field where there's an issue, you need to be notified, or, even when you're at home in emergencies, you need to be notified of these things right away. So if you have smarter systems, as we're going to have in the future, like sewer systems, water systems, road systems, right? So you're going to be notified, and you're going to have a better understanding of what's actually happening with your assets as a public works director. And AI is going to drive it. It has to. It's going to make our lives so much different. And for an engineer, it's the same, managing projects. Your data's there. How do you manage the data? You already wrote specs. You have tons of documents out there that you can, get access to, but it needs to be organized. And you need an AI model to train it all. And you need data. You need real-time data to access all that too. So if you look at the way things are moving, the public works directors are going to see a huge streamlined process with AI, and the engineers are just going to be able to build projects faster, smarter, and clearer so that contractors can see these projects and actually bid on them correctly, for example, and they're going to be able to go out in the job and know what they're doing versus being unclear and have a bunch of change orders, for example, and then the costs go up and everything else. So,
and Chad, I really love this topic too because it's near and dear to my heart. It is an example of, although like I said, not on the public work side, but here's an example from the private restoration space. You go out to a parking garage or any other concrete structure, right? And you're pen and paper, writing down locations of cracks, spalls, delaminations, whatever the case may be. I mean, just imagine if you had a system to catalog all that data, or, a computer vision assistant that would help you identify these, automatically tie them to plan, classify the defect, quantify it, right? And then push that as a virtual tour to these contractors who can, after their site walk, use it as a reference when they're putting together their bids. And this is all stuff we can do today. It's just that it has not been widely adopted by the industry. And if that's the case in private, right, like I can only imagine public is going to probably lag a little bit further behind.
I can't believe that private sector is still suffering and struggling in that space. My buddy's a construction guy. He does HVAC ductwork installs, and he tells me all the nightmare stories of project management and the time he spends on projects just trying to put out fires all day. And then what they're doing is, they're miscalculating bids, they're lowballing bids, so their margins are super tight. They're just trying to, get through projects like the skin of their teeth, basically, it sounds like. And it's a non-win. No one wins. The project owner loses quality.
Right. Yeah. If your buddy's doing a new install and the trades aren't coordinated, like, that return wasn't supposed to go through the wide flange, but what do I do? And now his guys are sitting idle, right? His margins are getting messed up. It's just, but this is the thing. It doesn't matter like what leg of the industry you're in. We all see it. It's just, and unfortunately, I think that has become accepted as just the way things are, but I don't know if they have to be that way.
They don't. They really don't. They just need to be, like I said, data has to be organized. Systems, when I'm talking systems, I mean platforms. I'm not talking the platforms that are just now being created where there's a bunch of features stacked on the features. We're talking about intelligent AI systems that basically will tell us what to do. Literally, you'll go out on the job site and it'll just say, this is what you need to do. And this is how we need to get it done. And that's the process we're going to move into because we have to. It just costs too much money.
So, and Chad, maybe that's one of the answers to my next question, but I'd like you to expand on it. So AI-powered procurement can reduce project delivery times by as much as half, right? So How exactly does the technology achieve this? And then what is the impact on cost and efficiency?
Yeah, I'd love to tell you exactly how it does it, but I can give you some insight. But look, you think about this, like you have the field data you just talked about that's out there. It's already being collected, right? All the asset data is available to us, right? So it's a matter of taking that data, organizing it so that contractors and engineers understand it, right? So you have two sides of it though. So think about the engineers, you have the project owners, you have the data that's sitting there. There's real-time conversations happening. And that's where we start to lose the actual project details, so to speak. So we need to streamline those processes. So we need to get that asset data into the stakeholders' hands. They need to be able to evaluate it. They need to give us a lot of details about it. And then we need to get it to the actual contractors for bidding. So that's the process, is getting that data organized, compacted, and then visually, I look at it as visually creating a system where it goes to them and the contractors sit there and they're looking at it and they will bid on that. The thing is, they aren't even going to bid on it. They're going to sit there and respond to the actual visualization of the actual project. So they're going to respond to it. It's going to collect data and it's going to streamline that whole process so that stakeholders simply will go to the bid opening and they're going to know exactly who to give the award to contract to based on skills, capabilities, assessing them. It's a scoring matrix that we created over Bidcurement so that we can show the project owners, here, these are the main contractors and the subcontractors too. So it's not just about like the GC coming in there and bidding on the project. You need to know who they're working with. You don't want to have a project go out there and the GC is like, oh, well, I'm just going to give it to the lowest quality sub and they're going to come in and do the work. Like, you should know that as a project owner, who's coming into your job site and how they're going to work on the job. And is it going to be efficient enough? So those are the things you got to think about. And then what's project delivery look like? So you got to take it from the beginning to the end. Project delivery is key there. So you have to have asset data, or I say asset data, but it is really when they install a wall, when they install a pipe, when they install things, you have to have an idea of what the condition was when they installed it. How did they install it? Where is it located? All that's very important information for the future of like digital twin, for example. So you got to create that digital twin so that we have all this information. So the procurement bidding process is it's one piece of the puzzle, but it's kind of threefold of how we're going to grab that information and put it together.
On the topic of digital twins, it's something we've talked about on this show a lot. For anyone who's not familiar with the term, there's a lot of good content out there. But in the case of, what Chad's saying, like if there's, some amount of like underground piping that gets installed as a part of a project, the idea behind a digital twin is that at any point in the future, you have access to that data. It can tell you like to the center line of that pipe where it's installed. And, it's probably still a good idea to just back check your work with, let's say, ground penetrating radar or another tool, but it should be able to get you pretty close. I'm an engineer, right? So conservative, better safe than sorry, but it's better than it's better than flying blind for certain.
I mean, we're talking centimeter accuracy now on assets. We shouldn't be able to like worry about digging, in the ground and hitting a utility underground and, in the future. Now we've made a bunch of mistakes with that. And I'll use that for an example because we never tracked the data on the assets. We kind of just like, and if we did, we were generally off by the markings, that we actually put on the ground. So we have so much misinformation and data out there currently about assets that we now have to make sure that we're using the right tools like digital twin, like, radar, like ground penetrating radar, like you to just confirm things are actually where they are. So in the future, 10, 50 years from now, someone else doesn't deal with the chaos that's going on right now in underground utilities, for an example, of striking them and blowing things up and billions of dollars that get wasted.
And
So,
and I think it's part two, like on the owner, because back when a lot of these projects were built, like we just did not have the technology to be able to locate these things, like you said, sub-centimeter accuracy. And a lot of that information, unfortunately, got filed away in paper as-builts, which I don't know, you're lucky if you can even find those. Whether or not they're accurate is a whole separate discussion. But if an owner, I mean, just as an example, right? If before, anyone gets on their side, it's like, you gotta, sign this agreement and here's a QR code with, access to some GIS database that maps out all the utilities on my site, right? So there's no excuse. Like there's absolutely no excuse if something happens because the owner's helping to do their due diligence and making sure anyone who comes on their property, like you said, is legit and is well informed.
yeah, that's what we need. We need real accurate information, almost real time. Everything should be at the point of like a plumber goes in and does repairs 5 years later, we should have that data. It should be somewhat of a requirement. I mean, for the building permit, now we're getting into permitting, right? So think about that. So if we're going to start looking at the future, permitting is kind of an issue. It's slow to get permits. It's like, well, the plumber goes out and does repair work. Well, what repair work did they do? Did they move the line? Did they fix the line? Like what happened, right? So it's just, we have to make sure we track all this information in the future too for life cycle analysis versus just, hey, right now we have a digital twin. Great. Well, what happens when they do maintenance or, on this property? What's that look like?
And does the person in the field that's performing the work, did they even know or care what a digital twin is, first of all? And then who is holding whatever company's responsible to basically update the digital twin so that whatever work they performed is actually captured? And I think there's so many links to the chain, and it's easy to sit in an office and think of the grandiose concept of like a digital twin and doing all these things. But then when it comes to the people in the field, they may not know or may not care, but that's where the work gets done. So like, how do you actually make sure things are updated?
Yeah. And that's oversight, accountability, transparency, the actual, the licensing organizations that give out the contractors, the trades, things like that. There has to be some accountability and transparency there. I think everyone's kind of got to work together to make that efficient. And, look, there's bad actors. That's why procurement plays a big role in this. And even when there's maintenance to be done later, procurement plays a massive role in everything we do because you have to make sure that these things are getting done because if you don't, then it starts to fail faster. The roads start to fail. The building starts to crumble. We need data. Like you need to hold things accountable and keep that information coming in real time as possible.
And speaking of buildings, Chad, data centers. So these are what makes, you go to Chat GPT and you type a query in, right? Like there's some computing power and energy that was required to like get that thing to spit an answer back out at you. And if you're just even barely paying attention to what's in the news and the media, right? AI powered by data centers, and that's a big ask for infrastructure wherever these things are built. So how's it affecting the AEC industry, and what should AEC professionals consider when designing and building these data centers?
Water and energy, man. And the chip processors. Here's the thing. We're evolving so fast in the chip processing market that we probably don't even know how much power we're actually going to need. You think about it, like, because the next chip could come out tomorrow or next week or a month from now, and it reduces energy by 50% usage, right? Because that would be the goal, right? Is get a processor that's obviously less energy consumption and less water, less need for cooling it down. That's where we're going to go. And that's what you got to start thinking about in our world.
Or models that, or the, I guess it's either the hardware or the software that can potentially reduce energy consumption. A couple of weeks there was some software that has since been I don't know, maybe proven to not be as promising as we once thought, right? DeepSeek, which that's a whole different discussion on the hype around this and how that affects markets and the economy, but we'll just stick to data centers here. So then you're spot on, because like how do you project these demands when things can change so quickly, but like the rate at which you tilt up precast for the building, or you run utilities to the data center, or you pave roads, right? Like that's not at the snap of a finger. I don't know how, long these chip advances might take, but I'd assume it's at least, it's probably no more than the development time of these data centers. So if you got all this investment in data centers and suddenly something changes, like what are we doing?
I would assume that the experts, and I'm no expert, I'm just kind of like, I see things and I'm like, okay, well, let's put two and two together kind of guy. But, the experts that are in this industry, in this space, I'm sure the investors that are putting in like the $500 billion for the Stargate thing, I'm sure that first of all, they want their money back. Second of all, they're going to push for these data centers. And then of course, they're going to want to eventually, honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, just let's think about what could happen there, because they want to make money off the actual usage of these data centers. So we're going to eat up a lot of water, a lot of energy. Maybe having a processor that is faster might not be so exciting at first until later, because make money off.
And then I guess something else to consider is, if let's say the cost to just do all this goes down, it gets cut in half. But I think you also have to look at the demand, because if the demand doubles because of a reduction in cost, I mean, that's still the same amount of resources, created by the data center that needs to occur. And I'm no expert in any of this either. It's just when the news about like DeepSeek came out, I was just confused, because to me, it didn't pass like the sniff test. And if that's the case for a layperson, I'd have to imagine the experts probably weren't thrilled either.
I'm sure. I think the competition, though, is what's happening right now, and it's competitions between countries. China's advanced so fast with their artificial intelligence, competing with America, and America's now at the point where we have to compete in that new digital transformation that's happening, and it will boost our economy by so much. And that's the thing I need everybody to kind of understand is, like, you need to open up to AI. You should, as an organization, especially for an engineering firm, architecture, for whatever, right? You need to open up to it, because it's going to make your ability to expand your markets, help customer service improve, and it's just going to make your life easier. And that's kind of the best way to describe it. Yeah, will it scare people? And yes, will there be automation where we won't have as many employees? For sure. That's just the way the economy goes, right? It's like, okay, well, now what do we have people do? What are they going to do differently? They have to reskill the labor force and stuff like that. And I'm kind of going off data centers, but that's what's going to happen when data centers are all built, is everything's going to become more automated and streamlined, and people are going to have to learn new reskill sets. And then, the businesses are going to grow faster and expand markets and provide better service. So that's kind of my spiel with that.
I agree with you. And I like to apply the teach, don't tell kind of framework to this, where you're, like, look on LinkedIn, look at the news, whatever. People are like, if you don't use AI, you're going to get left behind. It's X, Y, and Z. I mean, how do you think that feels like as a firm, right? It's like somebody's basically coming in telling me how I'm going to run my business and how I'm essentially going to go out of business in the next 5 years by someone who has like no idea what they're talking about. And I can appreciate how that feels. So instead, it's like, if you have people like us who have experience in the industry, it's like, hey, this is what we're seeing. I advise you look into it, but I'm not going to tell you have to do something one way or another. And I think engineers in particular are more responsive to meeting them where they are and just saying, this is what I got. Like, you make the decision as to like what you want to do. I'm here if you need help. And I don't know, it seems pretty simple to me.
Yeah, and look, I put out content similar to what you kind of described because I do feel like there's this is how we've done it mindset that's still out there in a lot of this space, and in a direct kind of just trying to get people to understand, like, look, in the next 5 years, this is what could potentially happen. These data centers, when they get built, someone in our industry, for example, creates something that is going to be so efficient and so streamlined, could really disrupt the space. Like, they can grab market share fast. Like, they could really just provide so much customer service on one place, one platform, that you probably won't be able to compete if they start grabbing market share. I mean, they're talking about one person could run $1 billion company, not in the private sector, for different comments, but one person could run $1 billion company through a AI platform. Now, it sounds crazy, but I mean, that's kind of where we're going. Like, it does make things faster. It does make things more efficient. And if you're not thinking about in your business right now, what can I do to optimize my company and make it faster and stronger and smarter, then you are potentially, you're rolling the dice to be out of business in the next 5 to 10 years. Honestly, I really feel that way. And I know that sounds crazy, but I see it. Like, I see what's coming down the pipe, and no one's going to put $500 billion into a data centers without their money coming back. So they want to streamline this economy in America.
And I think that's a reasonable approach, because it's not like you're saying like it's going to happen tomorrow. And to the comment about, the one person, $1 billion business, I mean, I think it was,
you saw it
too.
It was
like, was it Instagram? I want to say like
yeah,
$1 billion valuation with like 13 employees, something like that. Right. Well, I mean, that's pretty impressive as it is. I don't think you're going to see that type of efficiency in our industry, at least not in the short term, just because of how labor intensive and on-site everything is. But I actually think that's a boon, because if let's talk about workforce. It's like, this is a great industry to be in. Why? Because the further removed you are from a computer today, the more job security and the lower the likelihood of immediate disruption to you. Now, like you said, like it could be coming, but I think it's a great place to be in the short to midterm for sure.
Yeah, it won't happen overnight. That's for sure. Our industry is so complex, and we're still paper-based. And you have to think about all the large language models that we have to create to compartmentalize and organize that data, because it's just going to take a lot of, and we probably don't even have the data centers in place right now to actually do it all for civil infrastructure, just us in general, like the private and public sector. So it's going to take a while, but when it does and they set it up and we can make things much more efficient. And, I always think about this. If I was a CEO of a company that was running 500 engineers or 1,000 engineers right now, the biggest thing I have is disorganization. I have siloed data, and I don't really know what the hell is going on. Pardon my French. That's really what it comes down to, because you're being told by your leadership one thing, but you really probably don't have the data on your dashboard telling you the other things that are actually going on with your organization. The customers that are unhappy, for example, or the operations that are failing because you didn't get certain things done on time. Just think about all the moving parts of a business, and, we're going to change all that in the future. That would be the goal.
Yeah, and we're all only people. Like, there's only so much you can do. It's like, does that, second or third tier manager, like, do they realistically have the time to be boots on the ground at all times? No, but that's one of the only ways to know when you're not aided by technology, which leads me to my next question, Chad. So we talked about that 5-year timeline, and I like that in this context, because it's not tomorrow, right? Like you said, change doesn't happen overnight, but it's not
Right.
some like 30 to 40-year question out into the future. So over the next 5 years, what major AI and infrastructure trends should AEC professionals be paying attention to, and why?
Robotics. I think robotics is going to be a big player. I really do. I think we can write code and software so fast now that with AI, it's not great, but with the right team, you can create applications really fast. But robotics is going to be the future because as construction workmen, labor shortages, things like that is what I was thinking of, workmanship, quality, things like that. So people are going to start switching to robotics. And I think that's going to be the place where a lot of engineering is going to take place is like, how do we build with robots and humans? How do we work together in that space? And I know that sounds crazy, but you can kind of see it happening already.
Yeah.
Like, what does that look like? Yeah, for engineers to be able to manage projects. And I really do think that's where the value of an engineer is going to be, is like planning, designing, procuring, all that stuff's going to be streamlined. The biggest part is like making sure we're managing projects with the people and the robots. I mean, think about it. Just kind of some of my thoughts about it, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's here today. Like for anyone in the audience that's interested, like for example, if you want to go see robots in action, building homes, look up a company called Bot Built. Right,
Ooh.
that's one great example. You can go to their LinkedIn page and like literally see the robots putting together stud frame
Oh, wow.
walls. And we recently had a guest on the show. I think it's episode 68 with MPJ with Gecko Robotics. Right, they deploy robots out to ships, containers, vessels, and they're using robotics and non-destructive testing equipment to basically feed data back in a comprehensive manner that otherwise would be, pretty labor intensive and somewhat disorganized from a human's perspective. But here's the thing is like these bots collect the data, but somebody still needs to make the final decision. So it's not like humans are going anywhere. It's just the way we're going to be able to work is going to change. And like Chad said, like you don't have to buy into the hype, but you should at least do your due diligence and see what's out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening, and there is going to be snake oil. That's probably my biggest concern. Where procurement, I keep going back to procurement because I do feel like, we mentioned the $1 billion company with one person. That's kind of snake oilish, right? So we're going to see a lot of that in our industry, in municipal, civil, where you're going to be pitched with all this vaporware, all this amazing AI. First of all, you got to start thinking about the algorithms and who built those algorithms, who trained the AI. First of all, was that person qualified? Did they have the experience and institutional knowledge to actually build the algorithm with a developer? Kind of think about those things. But that's what we need to start thinking about, is like the future of like procuring things. It's like, let's dig deeper into like how these systems were built, who built them, and is it actually going to accomplish what we want without spending tons of money, right? So think about that.
And I think, Chad, one of the best ways to, address that concern is to just go try it for yourself. Like seeing is believing. Like I tell people, it's like I'll post content out there, say, hey, I've had a really good experience with XYZ or whatever, but don't take my word at face value. Just go try it. Like just go try it for yourself, because otherwise, if you don't try it, how are you supposed to know?
Yeah, that, and I always talk about like get clients' references, video them, like talk to them. Look, here's another crazy thing to maybe say, but deep fake videos are going to be huge in the future, where people are going to be posting fake videos of AI generated people saying that this person or this product was awesome, or really, like, we need to really start to challenge like AI then, of like, is it real or not? Is that person actually used the product or didn't they use the product? You know what I'm saying? Like start thinking about like where our future is going to go when AI is creating and generating a lot of content. Businesses can be using it for good, or they can be using it for bad. So we have to validate that. And it's coming to humans validating it, real conversations like this.
Mm-hmm. And I always say, Chad, we're in a shaking hands and kissing babies business, and with the advent of AI, I think that's only going to be more of the case and not less. We got a lot of great tools to do things online, do things digitally, but when it comes to these critical meetings, like you said, in person is definitely the way to go.
Yeah, we can do the in-persons for a while, but we still need to make things productive and fast. Like I did a calculation just kind of give you some ideas on what we spend on civil infrastructure professionals to develop business. Out of 50,000 professionals, we spend $3 billion annually just to travel, face-to-face trade shows, networking, things like that. It's a lot of money, man, just to develop business.
And I think I think it depends like on what you're trying to accomplish. Like,
Good.
I think, everybody's got their own personal opinions on trade shows and conferences and other networking opportunities. But I think there's a difference of like, meeting face to face with that public works director and showing them what you have is legit versus just thinking, hey, this trade show kind of sounds relevant. We're just going to like throw our hat in the ring, especially since like, the cost of these trade shows is up there. In theory, at least, just meeting somebody for lunch isn't too expensive. But as you know, running pilot projects for free isn't it's not free for the company.
I've done many of those. Woof. I wish I could have took back my time. But yeah, you're right. I think here's what I do think. I think there's a balance of hybrid where people are going to physically face to face. I think trade shows are going to have to adopt because virtual is still going to eventually be pretty much the quick and efficient way to get together. I think trade shows need to become more of a fun and engaging way to create content and educate each other differently than what they're currently doing by isolating in rooms and classrooms and things like that. I think we got to get smarter there. Those trade shows have been doing that for decades now. And I think that's where the hybrid model with virtual and humans interacting in the trade show kind of environment are two things, right? We can still have fun. Like I've ran networking events on live broadcasting on LinkedIn. I've had 6 vendors on there. I facilitated the whole conversation. We were laughing. We were having fun. Like you can even do gamification on these things now. Like there's a new way of virtual that's going to be coming to the industry that's going to be pretty advanced, and it's going to be pretty fun where people want to come and do these type of things because they want to get out to the young professionals that are coming into the space and reach them where they're at, and that's on their phones. And if you can't reach them on their phones, I have a ton of kids. I have 5 kids, not a ton. But I can tell you right now, they're sitting on Snapchat and they're flipping through their phones in milliseconds. That's how fast they're going through data. So you got to think about that. We have to adopt these different ways of engaging and getting people where they're at.
Well said, Chad. And what final piece of advice can you offer to AEC professionals that are looking to stay ahead and competitive in our industry, which is maybe not fully adopting AI use cases, but is definitely getting there?
Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's kind of one of the things I say. I have engineers that come to me and they're like, hey, man, I would love to get more projects. These are usually consultants. I would love to get more work. And I'm like, well, do people know you exist? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, do you have a website? No. Do you have anything that talks about you and what you do or what your experience is or what, what's going on in your life? Because that's where people want to meet people now. Is still in face-to-face, but also that virtual environment, which we go back to, is like, if I don't know you and you don't even have a website, how do you exist is kind of what I would say. So if I'm a director of public works and I have a bridge project that's $50 billion, whatever, 50 million, whatever, I'm going to look up who the engineers are on my team. Like who is the engineer from bringing to the team? And, typically they're kind of isolated and behind closed doors until you meet them face to face. But I would love to get there and see them where they're at, like on a website. Oh, these guys have built bridges. This guy's experiencing this, and this lady's experiencing that. Like that's a team I want to work with, right? So it's kind of that, P3, partnership, the design, build, and then we all work together as a team kind of mindset. But I think that's where people are going to have to get uncomfortable because we're not in that space where we're using video or talking on social media a lot. We're kind of hesitant to build our brands. And I think that's where we're going to have to get to.
Yeah. And that is, I think, a real concern in this industry just because work is like enterprise buying and selling isn't really done, I would say, through digital channels as much yet. And it's not that it's going to change. It is changing, and we can see that. So, but again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? Like software, how do you know? You try it out. People, how do you know? Social proof. So websites, testimonials, whatever it takes and whatever, you think is best to get the job done. But, Chad, thank you again so much for taking the time today. If listeners have questions, want to talk more about anything we've discussed today, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Thanks, Nick, for the time, brother. I appreciate it as always. But people can get a hold of me at my email is chad at Bidcurement, BIDCUREMENT.com, Bidcurement, or you can reach me on LinkedIn.
Beautiful. Short and sweet. Thank you so much for the time. This has been a really great conversation.
It's been amazing, Nick. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, sir. Until next time. Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aectechpodcast.com. There, you will find a summary of key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all of your engineering and technology endeavors. Thank you.